Peter Drucker famously said, what gets measured gets managed. So if you're growing your SaaS business, what you're probably measuring very meticulously are your revenues and your revenue growth. When I was working in ToutApp, my SaaS business, and I was working at Marketo, the company that bought my SaaS business, which was also SaaS business, revenues and how we measured revenues and how we thought about revenues versus booking and MRR versus ARR, oh man, it was kind of crazy. And so it's very often I see SaaS founders getting a little confused about how to measure revenues the right way. And that's super important if you're actually driving growth. That's like the one metric you want to nail and get right and be accurate about. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through the 3 principles that you absolutely need to know when it comes to measuring revenues the right way. Intro. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Unstoppable. I'm TK. On this channel, I help SaaS founders like you navigate the path to the next stage of growth, navigate the path to product market fit and beyond. So if you are new to the channel, welcome. I drop an episode every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, so be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified every single time I drop an episode like this with the TK energy. Also, if you're already part of the community, welcome back. Really excited to have you here. So on this episode, I'm going to go through some things about measuring revenue and all these metrics we talk about in SaaS businesses. I'm going to walk you through how to think about them the right way, because I don't know about you, but when I first started out in SaaS, which was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was kind of confusing. And back then, it was also a very nascent space. Everyone was still trying to figure out how to do it the right way. But now I think there's some broadly accounted things that we agree on how to measure revenue and what to focus on between MRR, ARR, ACV, TCV. So I'm gonna walk you through my 3 principles. If you're excited to get started, smash that like button and let's dig right into it. So the first thing that you gotta get your head around, especially when you're like just focus on revenues and thinking about scaling, is you gotta start thinking differently between bookings versus revenues. Bookings versus revenues. I made this mistake where I was talking about bookings, but I meant revenues, and we should have been focused on revenues and not bookings because cash flow is different between those. So this is where, all right, like take a deep breath. Let's dig into it. Bookings versus revenues. Bookings are essentially how much the customer has committed to pay you. Revenue, on the other hand, is how much the customer is paying you for this period of service, this next period of service. So, for example, let's just say you bring on a customer that has committed to a 3-year deal. They said, look, we'll sign with you for 3 years. You're the best system of record for my particular industry. 3 years, I'm all in. This is going to be a giant transformation. It's super strategic, and it's going to be $300K. So, did you book $300K? Is that your ARR? Is that your MRR? Is that your TCV? Right? Like there's some nuances here. And if you really want to nail this, especially as you measure your business, as you think about cash flow, as you think about fundraising and how to communicate your business growth and revenue growth and your bookings growth, you got to nail all this. So the first thing you want to understand is you booked that 3-year deal, but you need to only recognize the revenue for this current period. And just because you booked that 3-year deal doesn't mean that $300K is going to be in your bank account, right? They could be paying only for this year, and then they'll pay next year, and then they'll pay the following year, even though they're contractually obligated for 3 years, right? If they are actually paying on a yearly basis or a monthly basis, that'll also impact how you think about your cash flows. This is why investors really want to understand not so much bookings all the time, but they really want to understand revenue and what your revenue run rate is versus your bookings rate, because it tends to obfuscate a lot of things, especially around the health of the business, the cash flowing into the business, and all that. So basically, lesson number 1, there's a difference between bookings and revenues. Revenues are more important because that's the most impactful thing to your bottom line and your cash flow versus bookings. Bookings are great too. 3-year deals are fantastic, but you want to think about revenues because it's more present. The second thing you want to understand is whether you think about monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue. This one I learned a little bit on the hard way because I always thought ARR, annual recurring revenue. Even when I talk to SaaS founders, they're applying to my go-to-market program in the little form where you apply to join. I was asked, what's your ARR, not your MRR? And there's a reason for this. ToutApp originally started as a self-service business, and people signed up they activated, they swiped their credit card, and then we made a certain amount of money every month. And that was kind of like chapter 1 of the business. But chapter through chapter 10 of the business, we actually turned on an inside sales team. We actually de-emphasized the self-service business and focused a lot more on bigger deals and going after the enterprise and the upper mid-market. And so we always did 1-year deals or 3-year deals. And so we always thought in terms of ARR. Yeah, even with Marketo, there was no way you could sign up for a trial. You had to pay for the year. You have to do a 1-year contract minimum. In some cases, we made exceptions both at Tout and at Marketo that, okay, you have to do at least a 1-year deal, but you can pay quarterly, but you're still contractually obligated for the full year. And we'll come after you if you don't pay every quarter, right? We can break up the payments for smaller companies, but it was always annual recurring revenue. Now, not every SaaS business thinks about an annual deal. There are lots of SaaS businesses, even people in my program, that actually think more in terms of monthly revenue because they're only paying every month and they charge a credit card every month. And at any given month, the customer can decide they're going to leave. So the first thing to ask yourself is, do you want to think of yourself in an MRR cadence or an ARR cadence? I'm biased here. I actually think that every SaaS business should try to go for yearly deals. But that's not true for every market, right? In certain markets, the most you can do is on a monthly basis, on an MRR basis. So the first thing you want to figure out is your business thinking in terms of charging customers on a monthly basis, or can you actually move up to doing it on a yearly basis and then a multi-year basis? Obviously, the more of an important and urgent problem that you're solving, the more likely the customers are going to be to prepay for the year, sign up for the year, or even do multi-year deals. So you want to push for that. I actually think you should try to be on the ARR level and charge for the year all the time. But that may not be the case, that may not be feasible, or you may not have grown into it yet. So first choose whether you're on the MRR cadence or the ARR cadence. Now, how do you measure MRR, right? Or ARR for that matter? It's essentially any new business plus upgrades plus cross-sells minus downgrades minus cancellations. That's essentially your MRR. And simply put, that MRR times 12 is your ARR. If you're always charging on an annual basis, then you start with your ARR calculation and you can divide it by 12 for your MRR calculation. There's this extra thing that you get into, and I'm not going to go into it in this video, but this is something to talk about with your finance person. It's around revenue recognition. Revenue recognition is like the underbelly of SaaS finance and SaaS revenues, and how do you measure it? RevRec, there's like this ugly spreadsheet that's hidden in every SaaS business, and is usually by the controller or the accountant or the part-time CFO or the CFO, where they're trying to do RevRec the right way, and there's almost certainly bugs in there. Revenue recognition comes into if someone pays you for a 3-year deal upfront, like they pay the $300K, right? But they're on a monthly basis, like they're using the service every month. When do you recognize that $300K, right? And what do you do with that cash, and how do you manage that cash? That's revenue recognition. I won't go into that. For the purposes of this video, just know the difference between MRR and ARR and whether you should be on an ARR level or an MRR level. If you are truly on a monthly cadence, then stick with MRR. If you are doing 1-year deals and that's your baseline, you don't do business unless they sign up for a 1-year deal, which is where you want to get to with the SaaS business, in my opinion, then you want to do ARR, right? Now, can you go into ARR right away from the early stages? No, we didn't. We started with MRR and then we grew into ARR and then we were doing 3-year deals. So that's how you can think about that. But know that number one, bookings versus revenues. And then when you get into revenues, think about MRR versus ARR, and also talk to your friendly finance person about revenue recognition and make sure that they're doing that properly. Otherwise, it'll screw you over. The other thing I'll mention, I have one more on this and I'll get to that. But before I get to that, let me pause here for a second. There's this one time at Tout, this was like super early days. We were just in that chasm, right? We were moving from doing the self-service business to the inside sales business. And we were starting to book these 1-year deals, right? And they were like, they started with 20K deals and 30K deals and 50K deals, and they're coming in. And we hadn't even raised our Series A yet. We had only raised about $1 million, not like $970K in seed money. We were getting to $1 million ARR. We were basically cash flow positive, and we were thinking about our next run. But then all of a sudden, like I log in to our bank account. And by the way, we've been killing it. We had our best sales month. And I logged into our bank account and we weren't gonna make payroll. We weren't gonna be able to make payroll. We had like 7 employees at the time, reaching $1 million ARR. But we also wouldn't be able to pay our like engine yard bill. We were using engine yard. And And I'm like, I don't understand, like what's going on? We booked all this business, but we don't have the money in here. Like what the hell is going on? And that was my rude awakening to this entire mess of bookings versus revenues, in that just because we booked a deal doesn't mean the cash is in the bank account. There's also this thing around DSO, which is just essentially how much your customers owe you but haven't paid yet. Like we booked the deals, we put them in the platform, they're like, sounds good, checks in the mail. But it turns out even for large corporations, unless you have a serious follow-up process to say, hey, you owe us this money, you need to pay it, it's due in 30 days, we need to invoice you, and they have to ship you the check because you can't put $50,000 on a credit card. We essentially were in a point where we booked a whole bunch of deals, but essentially our rev rec was zero, and even more so, even our reg rec was okay, but our cash collected was negative, and therefore we were like out of money. And like I literally had to call up one of our investors, and I'm like, listen, we're out of money, but we're not really out of money. But we're out of money and we need you to wire us $25K so that we can pay our bills. But I promise you, like, there's a whole bunch of money coming our way. And that's when I really learned, like, okay, you gotta think differently between bookings and revenue, and you gotta think differently between MRR and ARR, and you also have to think differently about rev rec and cash collections. These are all important pieces that, like, I wanna build great product, I wanna market it, I wanna get more people, I wanna serve them. Yes, but you also have to think about this finance piece, which is why I wanna do this episode. So it was a crazy story. We're like out of money, but not out of money. And like our investor just laughed because he's like, I get this all the time. Like you need to get your stuff together. I'm like, I know. We're hiring a part-time CFO. And when we got our Series A, we actually brought on a firm to be our part-time CFO. So this is why this is so important. If you're seeing why this is so important, you got to embrace this stuff. You got to know the difference between bookings and revenues, MRR versus ARR. Can I just get a yes in the comments below? And also smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you're thinking about growing your SaaS business, I have a 5-point startup strategy guide. I'll tell you more about it, but let's wrap up on the third principle. And the third principle is knowing the difference between ACV and TCV, right? So we talked about bookings and revenues. We talked about MRR versus ARR. The last piece you just need to know in this like PhD for SaaS financial terms that are related to revenue is ACV versus TCV. ACV is your annual contract value. TCV is your total contract value. This is the league you want to get to. If you're building a substantial SaaS business, you want to get out of this like swipe a credit card every month. Like that's good to get started in, but in larger scales, you want to get into annual deals. You want to get into multi-year deals. That's when it gets super interesting. It gets super fun, right? And so let's just say Acme Inc. signed a 3-year deal with a TCV of $300K, right? If it's a TCV is total contract value. Total contract value of 3 years, $300K. That means your ACV, your annual contract value, is $100K. It also means that if this is your first customer, your ARR, annual recurring revenue, is now $100K. But it also means that your MRR is now 8.3K, roughly. I think I did the math right. Yeah, that sounds right. And so that's how all of these connect together. But also remember, there are nuances here if you've been paying attention. Like just because you booked the $300K deal doesn't mean you have $300K in the bank. Just because your payment terms matter, your collection matters, and all of these tie together to actually paint the true revenue picture of your SaaS business. There's also this thing of like, just because someone signed a 3-year deal doesn't mean they're always gonna honor it. If it's a tiny company, they might give you the wink and the nod and say that they're doing a 3-year deal, but they got a business. It's not money in the bank. This is why all these nuances matter. So to recap, know the difference between bookings and revenues. Pick whether you're on the MRR cadence or the ARR cadence, and also do multi-year deals. Those are the best, but just know ACV versus TCV. Those are the 3 principles I wanted to walk you through and the story I wanted to share about SaaS revenue metrics. What gets measured gets managed. So be sure to measure your SaaS revenues properly as you drive to growth. If you got value from this video, please be sure to smash that like button. Also, if you're new, be sure to hit the subscribe button and that bell icon if you haven't already, so you get notified when I bring you another video like this on how to grow your SaaS business. Speaking of which, if you are growing your SaaS business, be sure to check out my 5-point startup strategy guide. Inside my startup strategy guide, I go into much more detail on the key things you need to understand around your SaaS business to drive growth the right way. So it's completely free. Just go to getunstoppable.com/strategy or just follow the link below. And lastly, I bring an episode every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. So Be sure to let me know what future topics you'd like me to cover, because we're putting out a lot of content. We do a lot of research around these complicated topics, and we want to bring you the best relevant topics to you. So put that in the comments or hit me up on Twitter if you like. My username is over here. That's pretty much it. I really appreciate you watching this video. And remember, everyone needs a strategy for their life and their business, but when you are with us, yours is going to be unstoppable. I'm TK, and I'll see you in the next episode. I think I did the math right. Yeah, that sounds right.